Okay, good morning everyone. It's Al Emery at Momentum and kicking off our webinar for this fortnight, and today we're covering purchasing and replenishment. So we'll take you through the key areas of Exo that handle that, some of the configuration options, and then we'll go through some effective ways to manage purchase order approvals. We'll talk about purchasing related to jobs, and then we'll touch on supplier pricing arrangements or supplier special pricing and how you can use Exo alerts in conjunction with your purchasing process. So let's start with inventory replenishment, and I'll jump into our demo server. So you should all be seeing MYOB Exo here, and we're firstly going to look at stock. So as you can appreciate, replenishment is really designed to semi-automate the process by which you reorder inventory items that you're getting low of, rather than do a manual purchase order. Ideally, using the replenishment options makes things more efficient and hopefully more accurate. So every item obviously has its levels in each warehouse that you might have it in. Physical, committed, back order, incoming, and free stock. And normally replenishment is going to consider those things in suggesting a new reorder amount in conjunction with the min-max that's maintained on the Details 2 tab. It's important to note that the Details 2 tab, the defaults here, really just what the default is going to be in each location. You need to make sure that each item has a min-max in each individual location, because that's what the replenishment or the forecast order uses when the purchase order, when the forecast purchase order screen is used. So if you have multiple warehouses, you can have different min-maxes in each warehouse, because obviously your sales volume might be different in different warehouses. Each product can also have an EOQ. EOQ means economic order quantity. So if your supplier, and this is your main supplier, only sells in multiples of 10, for example, then you can put in EOQ of 10. Mm-hmm. So as far as looking at forecasting of purchase orders, there's really 2 or 3 main options. So the first one is a report, and under reports, stock reports, you'll see a report there called Stock Reorder Requirements Calculation Based. And that's really designed to look at a particular warehouse and show you all the items that the system is suggesting you reorder based on demand and min-max. You can choose to hide items that you haven't sold before or not. I'm going to choose not to. So you'll see on the report here, the report is grouped in supplier order, and this is based on the main or primary or default supplier for each product. So this is only going to work if your inventory data has been, reviewed and set up correctly, so that firstly each product is linked to the correct main or primary supplier, and ideally that each product also has a min-max that's going to be used for calculating what you need to order. So this report, as you can see, is going to show you for each supplier the products that you would order from them, 7-month sales history, so 6 down to 1 plus the current period. So that's quantity sales for that item over the previous 6 months. It shows you an average, so the average sales per month. Then it shows the current physical stock on hand. Incoming is basically the quantity that's already on existing purchase orders for that item that have not been received yet. For sales is your committed and or back-ordered sales orders for that item, and then your min-max. And the reorder quantity is basically a calculation of what is needed to take that item from its current available stock being total plus incoming less committed, and to get it to the max. So it's basically giving you suggested order quantities per item. So obviously this being a report is not automatically generating purchase orders for you, but it is telling you what suppliers you need to raise purchase orders for a particular location. What you might then do, if we look at this particular supplier, is use the forecast purchase order screen. So the forecast purchase order screen pretty much does the same as the report does, except you need to nominate a supplier and a location. Click the red button, generate stock requirement for that supplier. And you're seeing much the same information, except because it's part of the application, you can use that information to create the actual purchase order. So what we're seeing is each item that this supplier is a supplier of, stock code description, the current stock on hand, what's already on order, what's committed on sales orders, the free stock, so that the free stock is a calculation of in-stock plus purchase order less sales order, so 5 plus 2 less 15 is -8. The current min-max, this screen allows you to display up to 12 months of sales history, which is useful because if you have a one-off spike, then that might mean you don't need, you can take into account that as to whether, a very short spike in sales volume is going to be a trend that continues or not, and consider your order quantity accordingly. Then you've got the calculated reorder amount and the order now amount. So they're really stated the same, and the purpose of them is that one is showing you what they're both showing you what the system is suggesting you order, but the order now is editable, and you can change that, round it up or down, pretty much do whatever you like with it. And from this screen, you can basically generate the purchase order. So you've got a button here, Post Order to Screen, which will generate the purchase order. So you can see using that process saves a hell of a lot of keying, because all of the items that the system was suggesting we order are thrown straight into the purchase order with the quantity that either the system suggested or we edited, and you send it off. A couple of things to be aware of. Purchase orders have a due date. and that due date is based on the lead time that you have with that supplier. So if we drill into that supplier, which you can do from the purchase order screen, either by double-clicking on the name or clicking on the account button. Every supplier on the Details To tab has a primary lead time and a secondary lead time. For local suppliers, they might commonly be the same. But for an import supplier, for example, you might have a primary being by water and a secondary being by air. So it might be 90 days versus 14 days, for example. So the due date on the purchase order is always today's date or the order date plus the number of lead time days. So if you do notice or you're not sure where that due date is coming from,
this doesn't really have to do with me reordering stuff.
All right, so that's one purchase order done. Some ways that you can use this screen to help update your data. So, for example, if you haven't been using forecast purchase orders or replenishment before and you want to start, obviously you need to look at each item and check that does it have the correct min-max and things like that, which you can do from this screen. It's not a bad way of doing it. So if you choose List All the Suppliers' Stock and recreate your list, it will show you all the items for that supplier, whether the system thinks you need to order them or not. And you can then drill into each item, look at what's on hand, look at the min-max, update it for a particular location. And if you refresh that list, you'll see the min-max is now updated, and that immediately updates the calculation. Obviously, depending on the amount of items you need to get through, other options are to export your data to Excel and import it back in. But given that you would always order a supplier at a time, this isn't a bad way to review what your data looks like with a view to using this system, and you can roll it out a supplier at a time. We do have customers who maybe might do some more detailed analysis before they decide what their reorder quantity is. So let's just refresh this for a different warehouse. And you can copy this data to Excel. At this point, you could put some formulas in, what have you, to have a different way of calculating what your reorder figure is. And you can actually paste that information back into this screen. So you just need to copy and paste the columns that have stock code description and order now, and that will basically cause this to be updated. So there's enough flexibility in the screen to enable you to do some additional calculations on this to arrive at an order now quantity that you're happy with. It might take into account demand that the system currently doesn't know about, such as forecast sales that haven't been entered into the system yet as a sales order. And I'll just touch on what purchase orders or sales orders these columns take into account, because you actually can control that, and sometimes that's relevant, particularly for businesses that are importing or exporting and have some kind of indent program where you might be receiving orders from customers but they don't take delivery for 6 months or something like that. Can be similar on the purchase order side. So there are configuration settings to say only take into account sales orders and purchase orders within a particular date range. And that's done by way of a couple of profile settings in the configuration module. Configuration modules normally only available to your administrator, but you'll see in the profile section there are some settings for the sales order maximum forward days, purchase order maximum forward days, and work order as well. And what that really is telling the system is include in the calculation for reordering sales orders that are due up to 90 days into the future, but not more than 90 days in the future, and the same with purchase orders. So either of those settings can be changed, and that will affect the calculation that the reorder report uses and also the forecast purchase order screen. So if you did have an indent sales order program where you're entering sales orders but they're not due for delivery for some time, then you can ensure that your days forward takes into account that and potentially exclude those from your reorder calculations. Okay, so we'll just talk now about purchase order approvals. So whether a purchase order is created from a forecast purchase order or whether it's just a manual purchase order, you can implement some approval around that. So that basically works in two ways. Each person, so each user of the system, can be allocated a stock and a non-stock purchase order authority limit. And if they create a purchase order of either of those types that exceeds their limit, then the purchase order, if the approvals feature is on, won't be able to be sent to anybody. It will be able to be created and saved, but it won't be able to be printed or emailed. When that happens, the approval process is quite straightforward. You can implement an EXO alert, which causes the authorizer to receive an email to notify them that they've got a purchase order or purchase orders that need to be approved. If we look at this purchase order, you can see it has a status of awaiting authorization. If the status is awaiting authorization, the print button and therefore the email option is disabled. A person who can authorize it just basically comes to this screen, right-clicks with their mouse, and they can authorize the selected order. And if they have sufficient limit to approve an order of this size, they'll be prompted to do that. So this one is within my limit. It's now got a status of not processed, and once I save that, the print button will be enabled. I think I probably need to come back into that. Okay, so now it can be printed and emailed. So it's reasonable, basic purchase order approval, which at least gives you some control over the value of purchase orders that different people can create and send, rather than deal with it when the supplier sends you the bill. In conjunction with that, you would normally use what's called an Exo alert. And Exo alerts are basically what drives the workflow and enforces the rules. So we can set up any number of Exo alerts, and this one is basically the one that would notify somebody that a purchase order exceeds their authorization limit, and the purchase order gets sent to the authorizer. Another example of a purchase order of a Exo alert that can be very useful is preventing somebody from entering a purchase order that has no value, because that's a common way of people working around an authorization methodology. So they might put in items on the order but not put in a cost or a price to try to bypass the authority, but using an Exo alert you can actually prevent that by making a blocking alert, or you can allow it but inform somebody by creating a warning or a silent alert. So I'm just going to move on to purchasing related to jobs. And there's 3 ways that a purchase order can be created relating to a job. So obviously, if you don't use the job costing module, bear with us, but quite a few of our attendees do. So I'll touch on the 3 options, and in particular the purchase order wizard, which semi-automates the process. By design, the job purchasing process is separate to the replenishment process, because purchase orders for jobs normally relate to items that you don't keep in stock, and therefore aren't considered in the replenishment calculation. It's treated by design as a separate order. So in Exo job costing for a particular job, so we've got an example of a job. This is a fabrication job. And I'm looking at the quote tab, and I can use that information to generate a purchase order. And the way that that can be done is there's a column here called copy to. And what that really means is what do we want to do with this item? And the options are N for nothing, C for cost, P for purchase, and T for time. Part of the setup of Exo initially often is being able to set these to the correct default. So obviously items that you normally would not keep stock of but would need to order in if there was a job, you can set this so that it automatically defaults to P. Items that you do keep stock of and want to issue to a job from your warehouse, you can set so that they default to a C. And items that relate to time that you might be entering timesheets for, you can set so that they default to T. That's done by setting up what's called cost groups. And the examples you can see here is materials stock, which are defaulting to C, materials purchased, which are defaulting to P, and I would have one for labor, which would default to T. Now, from a job, you can use what's called the purchase order wizard, and it will automatically create a purchase order for any line here that's marked with a P that hasn't already been ordered, and it will order it from the normal or default supplier. the supplier you're ordering it from can be changed. So I can pick a different supplier. And I'm going to set this one to materials purchased, which has updated that to a P. So let's do that with a couple of others. So I've got 3 items, 3 different suppliers, all marked P. I've got others marked P, but you'll see that their status is also P, which means they're already on an order. So the purchase order wizard will then say, okay, we've got items marked P for these suppliers, so let's cycle through them and generate the purchase order. So carpart.com, it throws in the item details as exactly as it is on the quote tab and automatically links it to this job. Save and exit, print and email the purchase order, carry on to the next one. So whether there's 1 or 10 lines or 50 lines, it'll automatically add those based on the supplier that you've nominated on the quote tab. And you'll see that those all get updated to a status of P as they're ordered. And that means that if I have a look at the purchases tab, I'll see those and any other orders that I've already created sitting in the purchases tab, either ordered awaiting delivery or the ones that I've since ordered and received in would be at an invoice status. So that's the most efficient way to do purchasing for a job because it takes a lot of data entry out of the process just by utilizing information that is often already there on the quote tab. You can do manual orders. So on the purchases tab, there's a purchase order button. And if you click that, it will create a blank purchase order that you can then update, order anything from any supplier. It will automatically link to this job, and it will automatically link the branch to the branch of that job, and then you can order any items you like. You can multi-select, update the quantity, update the price, and send that off to the supplier. And the other option is from the purchase order screen, which you could do in either Exo Business or Job Costing. You can just do a manual purchase order. The difference between this option and the one that I just did from the job is, in this case, you need to tell the purchase order what job and what branch this relates to because you're not creating the order from a job. So you can nominate the job at the top screen. And that just means that any line you add to the order will default to that job. It's actually possible to order multiple lines for multiple jobs using this method. And it's also possible to order some lines for stock and some lines for job. So I could say this one is for 218302, 123, that one. So 4 different lines for 4 different jobs. So hopefully that makes sense. I guess the one limitation, if there is one, of the purchase order wizard in job costing is it's really a job at a time, or at the very least a master job at a time. You can't, using standard features, raise one purchase order for, say, all items on 10 or 20 or 50 or all active jobs. We do have an add-on that handles that functionality. So if that's something that you come up against, we do have a solution for it that automatically adds any item that's on the quote tab of a job marked with a P. It will automatically add it to a purchase order for you. But the standard functionality is pretty good and enables you to save a lot of data entry. So let me just go back to my slides. So we've talked about inventory replenishment, using the report, the forecast purchase order, checking min-max, and also looking at the number of days forward that you consider for purchase orders and sales orders. We've talked about purchase order approvals and how they can be used. We've covered job purchasing, and we've also looked at Exo alerts. I'm just going to talk about supplier special pricing because that does come up from time to time and isn't commonly used by some of our customers, but possibly because of just not necessarily knowing what the options are. Actually, before I go to a supplier, let's find a product. So we'll look at the remote start security. The main supplier is Aussie Car Parts. The supplier cost is $52.77. That's also the last cost, and the average is $69.50. There's obviously been some different costs coming in, and that's kind of the normal stuff. As far as setting up, let's say, Aussie Car Parts for a period of time gave you a special price, you can actually maintain that in the system and the purchase order will use that price. So in the supplier, there's a discounts prices tab, and it enables you to create what's called a price rule. So these price rules can be used for break pricing or one-off special pricing. So if I create a new price rule, I can find that item, remote car start security, and you then have the option of what the calculation is. So you might say, we're going to apply a discount of 20% off either the latest price or the supplier price or the average or the standard. Supplier price would probably be most common, and that's what the calculated new price would be. So you can do it by way of a discount. And if you were doing break pricing, then you would say, let's say it's 20% off, but only if we order more than 10. You could then add another price rule and say, well, it's 30% off if we buy more than 20. And then the purchase order will automatically put the discount in, dependent on the quantity. If we pick another item, the security alarm, rather than use a discount, we can just simply enter a different price. So the normal price was $81, it's $75, and there's no real volume around that. And you can set that as a fixed price rule. So a fixed price rule means even if this isn't the lowest price, use it anyway. If you don't tick fixed price, then Exo will use the lowest price it finds on a purchase order, which might be this price or it might be the normal price. So if we now raise an order for Aussie Car Parts, add those items, you can see that the bottom items automatically picked the new price, and irrespective of quantity, that's not going to change. But the top one should be putting my discount in based on quantity, which is making a liar of me. But I mustn't have activated that rule or set it as a fixed rule. But that's a way of, basically being able to maintain more detailed pricing or one-off deals with a particular supplier, so that the people creating the purchase orders haven't got to necessarily manually check the price each time or override the price. So when you maintain your special pricing with each price rule, you can nominate the dates that it starts or finishes on. So examples of how that might work is sometimes suppliers say, for this month we've got new pricing, or for this month we've got special pricing on particular items, or we've got, if you're putting in place permanent volume discounts, then you would just make your stop date a date that's well into the future. Okay, so that was pretty much all the planned content today. Hopefully you found that informative, particularly for any of our customers running inventory, not using replenishment. We highly recommend you give it a try. Some of our biggest customers had massive time savings in managing their reordering process. Just simply by focusing on that area. And an example, one of our customers is a $30, $40 million wholesaler with outlets all around Queensland, and their salespeople entering orders really never have to worry about a purchase order, because at the end of each day, having entered all the new sales orders, they run forecast purchase orders, which automatically takes into account any new sales order that's been entered and whether you have sufficient stock or not, as well as any purchase orders that have already been raised, and automatically orders the correct quantity. So it does mean that each item needs the right min-max and that sort of stuff, but once you've got that set up, it's a massive time saving compared to manually checking the stock and having one-off purchase orders for various things, which can often have a higher cost or a freight cost. So any questions, fire away. Otherwise, thanks for attending today.
Hi, Alex. James from Colpack.
Hi, James.
I just had a question with the purchase order approvals.
Yes.
If you have a number of people putting the purchase orders in that then sit there awaiting authorisation, can those multiple purchase orders, if there's more than one for the same supplier, be consolidated prior to authorising? Is there an easy way to do that?
There isn't a standard way to do that, no, James. That would be, it would be doable to customise it, but there isn't a standard option to say, select 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 purchase orders and turn them into one. Okay.
And one other question, looking at the automated calculation-based process, you've got the forward order days.
Yes.
Am I right in assuming that if you had, for example, works orders that didn't have a due date set on them, they would just not fall into the calculation?
Look, I don't think it's possible to have a work order that doesn't have a due date. By default, it can't be left blank. So the due date would be used.
From what I've seen, it automatically puts a date in when you create the works order, but it's happy for you to remove that date and leave it blank. Okay.
That would be an interesting scenario to test. I'd suggest as a process that if you're wanting to use forecast orders to also include any components that you need to reorder that you're using in a work order, then then I wouldn't allow that to be left blank.
Yeah.
We do have a number of customers that, do predominantly manufacturing using work orders, and they use replenishment all the time, but it obviously is reliant on that due date.
Yeah.
If the system allows a due date, it wouldn't be difficult to put a trigger on that to prevent it.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, it doesn't seem like there's any further questions, so thank you all for attending today. We'll have our next webinar in 2 weeks' time, and Megan will be in touch with what our next topic will be. Thanks very much, everybody.